joining. We're glad to have you here. I think most of you have probably been on one of these webinars with Jane or I in the past. But just to give you an overview, Jane and I are with CoreTech Revolution. We are a healthcare technology and strategy company. We specialize in project management, organizational restructure, strategic initiatives, those types of things. Jane has over 30 years of experience with healthcare and technology. She has held several senior level positions and joined CoreTech a few years ago as a strategy consultant. And of course, I'm the owner of CoreTech, and I have over 20 years of experience in technology, primarily in the space of healthcare, and worked a lot with information exchanges, EMR implementations, and other strategic initiatives. And today, we have a special guest speaker with us, Chris Daly. And Chris has more than 30 years of executive level experience in software development. He's worked with various levels of organizations, startups. Most notably, he worked with Stratus as a chief technology officer. He's also worked with Fortune 500 companies like Experian, Fidelity, Angie's List, where he served as a senior director. And in the last several years, Chris has been working to guide teams through agile transformation and processes in various industries. And so that's what he is here to talk to us about today. And Chris is a certified Scrum Master and professional product owner, PSPO. I've never heard of that one, Chris. And a certified management 3.0 trainer. And Chris is also the owner of VLife, which is an Indianapolis-based training and consulting organization focused on creating happy workspaces and empowering successful businesses and incorporating people-focused approaches. So we're excited to have Chris here today to share with us about Agile. So with that said, Chris, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to take over the screen now, if that's all right.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So can everybody see my screen? Yep. Okay. So we're going to talk about the ROI of Agile today. And this is one of the things that I have to tell you, when I started talking to Michelle and Jane about doing a presentation on the Agile, one of the suggestions Michelle made was, let's talk about the ROI of it. And I, as somebody who's been around the Agile space for a long time, I always try to shy away from that because people tend to think of Agile as a silver bullet. It tends to be a way where they can come in and I don't have to, if I'm a senior leader, I don't have to change anything. We'll just go do this Agile thing and it'll fix all our problems. And so I was a little hesitant to go there because I've tried to avoid that. But I think it's important that we do talk about it, maybe not getting into the specifics of how much it is and how big it is as a justification, but start talking about the concepts and the improvements and the theory behind it so that we can help in our promotion of Agile. Let's see if this thing goes on. You've all probably, some of you, I'm sure some of you on the conference call or on the webinar here have seen know what our company is and know what we do. The name of the company is actually a sentence. It's VLife, which life means agile, flexible, transparent. So that's where the name comes from. So what we're going to talk about today is, again, we're going to talk about the benefits of adopting an agile mindset and how those benefits can impact your bottom line, right? This is an introductory set of topics that we're going to cover today. There's a lot more detail. I could spend all day talking about the benefits of Agile and Scrum and all the various components of Agile that can add up to really give you a powerful way to solve complex problems. But again, this is just an introductory set, an introductory overview. So what we're going to talk about today is the introduction. Of course, we're doing that right now. And then I'm going to lay the foundation. I had assumed that part of the audience was not going to be really familiar with Agile. And so we'll go through that and talk about what Agile is and how it works. We're going to talk about it in a little bit different approach. Rather than talking about what it is from a process standpoint, we're going to talk about it in terms of the innovation curve and how people accept products and accept new features and accept change. A little bit different way of talking about it so that it will hopefully resonate, because that's really what it comes down to. It really comes down to how do we empower our business to be able to get value quicker out of what we do. So again, we'll explore that a little bit. We're going to talk about what we want, and then we'll talk about the ROI impacts on our bottom line. And then we'll conclude with a wrap-up session. So the foundation. So what do we know? Let's start with that. So Agile isn't chosen because it's cool. It's a buzzword. It's, you know, a silver bullet. It's something we want just because. People that really want to go forward and really want to improve choose it for another reason. They're not going to choose it just because it's the latest and greatest fad. It can be very expensive to go through and try to implement and transition an entire organization to an Agile mindset. So we really want to, when we choose Agile, to adopt that Agile mindset, we really want to be pragmatic about what we're doing and make sure we're doing it for the right reasons, not just because it's cool. We're also trying to solve complex problems. We're trying to solve problems that exist in a space that a lot of the time it's undefined on what we do. It's undefined on what the problems are. We generally know where we're going, but we have no idea potentially how to get there, or we may have an idea and it's really a high-level idea. We haven't vetted out all the challenges that we have and all the things that are going on. So Agile really sits in that space, and we need to acknowledge that when we're doing our work, for the most part, our work is complex. If it were simple, they'd be able to hire anybody to be able to do it, but it's not. It's really complex. So this is the innovation curve that I spoke about earlier. This is a way of, it's a model. I'll grant you that it's a model and the percentages change, but it's a way of being able to anticipate how many people or what percentage of the population is going to accept innovation or going to accept change. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about adopting an Agile mindset. We're really talking about introducing a change in the way we do our work. And if you think about it, we're really introducing a change to change. We're really we want to be continuously improving. We want to be continuously changing. We want to continuously be adapting to whatever's going on in the environment. And so it's really important that we do that we understand this as leaders, and not just technology leaders. All leaders should really try to understand this. So if we can talk for a minute about it, off to the left, you'll see that we have 2.5% are what we call innovators. These are the crazies that are outside the Apple store in the freezing weather in January, waiting for the newest, latest, and greatest Apple product. And they've been out there for weeks, camping on that sidewalk. They're the ones that they just want to innovate. They agree with where it's going. They have money to spend. They're willing to spend the money just to have an opportunity to be the first in the market. The next category is the early adopters. That's about 13.5%. This is the population that they're not at the Apple store sleeping out all week, but they go out maybe at 11 o'clock the night before it opens and get in line, right? They're not willing to make that big, huge investment to get the newest, latest, and greatest things. They want things that work, but they also are willing to accept them to be buggy. They can have problems. They can have challenges. They know that what they're going to do is what they're going to buy and what they're using will help them in the long run. When I think about the early adopters, I think about the folks that are buying Teslas now, right? So we had the Teslas that came out that were $100,000. Now we're talking about, now the prices come down to there's a $60,000, and then now there's a $40,000 model. That's really where we expect the early adopters, right? These are the folks that want things to work and are willing to pay to support that technology. The 34% in the early majority is the next one. This is where things start going viral. This is where people that they're willing to spend money to get an ROI on it. They're willing to spend money to get a benefit on it. They won't really accept buggy things. They won't accept defects, but they are willing to take some right? A few inconveniences, but they're really not interested in being out there on the bleeding edge, but they're right behind it. The next category is the late majority. It's 34%. This group is these are the ones that go and buy the technology at the, they're going to buy it when it hits target. They're the ones that are going to invest and wait until the price comes down. They're price conscious. They want it to work. They typically are less sophisticated in terms of utilizing that technology than other folks. They may buy it because or may invest in it because they have to, right? Maybe they've put it off as long as they could and they have to. Maybe they're faced with a situation where it's convenient for the convenience of not having it is getting to the point where it's so small that they really feel like they have to move. And then the 16%, that's the laggards. Those are the folks that just got their iPhone last year, like my dad. Just got his iPhone. His contact list for years was a laminated sheet of paper in his wallet, and that was how he had his contacts. He didn't need those in those phones. They're the last ones to go. And so those are the ones that typically they're going to fight tooth and nail against technology. They're going to not adopt. They're going to be they may even be passive and just say, "No, I don't need it. I don't need that thing." So those folks are the ones that there's typically you'd almost have to give it to them to get them to take it. So, and finally, your objectives when you're going and considering an agile mindset are really different. You're looking to reduce your time to market. You're looking to increase your ROI. We want an improved user satisfaction, right? Our users are potentially ready to revolt against us because we deliver low quality work. Our products are low quality. They are buggy, requires them to have significant workarounds. Maybe we go after Agile because we want to lower costs. We've read somewhere that you can reduce your cost if you go take an Agile mindset. Maybe we've read somewhere we want to reduce risk. Maybe your objective is adapt to a changing landscape. I'll let that one sink in for a minute because we all don't know what that is right now, right? A changing landscape. So if you're doing traditional project management last week and suddenly everybody is remote and your contractors are off the job, you're stuck. You've got potentially a huge investment in a project or product or in features or whatever it is you're doing, and you're stuck right now. You haven't delivered any value. You've got potentially a huge sunk cost. What are you going to do, right? And that's a potential problem. We don't know what the future is going to be next week, right? We could be on government lockdown, heaven forbid. How do we adapt to that, right? If you're not having an agile mindset, an adaptive mindset, you're going to have problems, and you're going to struggle for a while. Last couple things we want to our objectives for Agile. Maybe we want higher quality. We want to deliver less bugs. Maybe our users again are revolting because we deliver work and they can't use it. Major functions don't work. We also, and this was really out of a conversation I had with Michelle. I added this one yesterday. Engage the workforce. So engage your workforce. Get your people to where, create an environment where your people are coming into work and they want to come into work. They're just not checking the boxes, right? Showing up, checking the boxes and going home. We want to engage our workforce, and that's really important when we're considering an agile approach. So let's talk about how we get stuff done. It's not quite the same. So when we use plan-driven development, we often refer to that as waterfall. It's fixed team, fixed scope, fixed date, and usually it's a big upfront design and planning session. And it typically results in inaccurate estimates, we're over budget, projects are late, decreasing quality, and lack of satisfaction. And then I highlighted the last one there. Must have all my features. How many times have we heard that we have to have everything? That we've got to have every single thing on the list. There's no such thing as an MVP. There's no such thing as an early delivery. People are, our users are used to the fact that they feel like they typically only get one shot at it. And then once that project's over, once that plan's executed, they're done. So they ask for everything they possibly can. And because they do that, we tend to invest in things that probably we shouldn't, things that don't add value. You might even call those waste if you have a lean mindset. So so these results, right, are not ideal. They're not what we should be looking for if we're trying to do plan-driven development. So when we talk about plan-driven development, if we go with the concept that you can't get value until the software hits the customer's hands, most folks take the approach of, we're going to build for the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, and the late majority. That's what we're talking about when we say we got to have all our features. We're talking about building for everybody. And that adds a significant cost to it, right? Because there may be features that are only used once a year, or even not even used. The Standish report, which I know there's some discussion about the Standish report and its validity, but the Standish report quotes that about 60 to 70% of software is hardly ever used. You know, that's a big investment for companies to make in terms of software and hardly ever use that and not get the value out of it. So when we talk about value-driven development, that's really what we refer to as Agile project management, or Agile. We're really talking about just in time, just enough, continuous improvement, and we don't compromise on quality. And it tends to give us the largest value. The reason one of the things I want to just mention here is the uncompromised quality. How much money is lost, or how much does it cost to fix a production defect when it gets into the wild, as opposed to finding it when we're in development or testing phase? Depending on who you believe out there, it could be 10 to 100 times the cost of just fixing it in development. But yet we don't do that all the time. And so that cost, that buried cost that we don't see, is out there. And you see that in some organizations where they're spending 70, 80, 90% of their time fixing bugs, right? If we compromise on quality, it's eventually going to catch up to us. And but to go back to Agile, we want to flip the triangle, right? We want to fix cost and time, and what's variable is scope. And that ends up resulting in better business engagement. We tend to eliminate more waste. It makes it efficient from a quality, given our quality standards. So we know what quality means. We've defined it. We've agreed to it in the organization. So it makes it easy for us to go through and validate, is this working or not? And it also makes it easier from a forecasting and budgeting standpoint. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So with Agile, value is received, again, when it hits the customer's hands. So if we deliver our software and it's geared toward the 13, the innovators and the early adopters, we can start receiving value right then and there, as opposed to waiting until much later and going all the way out further to the right after the late majority. If you are in a software as a service business, right, a SaaS model, the quicker you can start receiving revenue, the better, because the more months you have to receive it. By the same token, if you can get features out there quicker that help improve the quality of your products that you've got for your existing customers, it can help those customers stay with your system. They're going to see improvement, and they're going to see you're constantly improving. And that is far more impactful and powerful than just delivering software once every 6 months. Seeing it moving forward and getting that continuous reminder that, hey, we're making your life better. Hey, we're improving things. That really can be impactful to your customers. So if we take an Agile and we compare that to a plan-driven approach, this is really what it kind of looks like. I've overlaid some the Agile stuff over with it. You'll notice that across the top, requirements, design, code, test, those represent some basic high-level activities that we do. You'll notice down below that I've taken those same colors and I've replicated them 4 times, because in an Agile mindset, instead of using people for a fixed period of time and then they go on to the next thing, we're using them consistently. And that's important because when you allot your teams, or you design your teams, you're looking at they're consistent all the way across. That makes it very easy to budget, right? I've got 2 developers, a tester, I've got a UX person, and I got a Scrum Master and a product owner. That's 7 people. I budget 7 people for 16 weeks. I don't have to worry about, well, I've got 5 in requirements, and then I've got 10 in design, and then I've got 40 in coding, and then I've got 20 in testing. It makes it more even. It allows us to schedule the work and makes it more consistent. The work tends to flow through the organization when you structure it, where you've got people constantly working on together as a team. So what do we want? Do we really know what we want? I got a chuckle yesterday when we were going through this presentation on this one. And I'm not sure that we really know. Most people really don't know what they want until they actually see it. You know, we can look at, and it's going to be interesting as we go forward as here with Amazon and things like that, right? The mail order thing. How do we buy clothes if you can't try them on, right? You buy clothes, they come, you try them on at home, and you got to ship them back. But how do you, if we don't have stores, how do we do that? We can look at it in a magazine, it looks great, until we get it home and we put it, until I get that shirt home and I put it on, I go, oh my gosh. Or my wife asked me, you're not going to go outside looking like that, are you? You know, we really don't know what we want. So until we get feedback from people. So that's really what we need to consider and think about. So when we ask, am I going to get all my features? What we really should be asking is, when are we going to have enough capabilities to release it to our users? When are we going to have enough capability to get feedback? Feedback is one of the most important gifts you can get from your users. They're going to tell you what they think. And it can be a little bit, I'll change that from a little bit. It can be pretty unnerving. It can be a lot unnerving. It takes a while to get used to somebody telling you what you're doing wrong. And it can drive you crazy sometimes. It still drives me crazy. But without feedback, how do you know what you're doing? How do you know what you're doing wrong? How do you know what that person wants to make them, for it to be beneficial for them, to make them happy? So we want that feedback, and to do that, we have to get the software or the products in our customers' hands. Because we generally don't know what we want, what we do know is that about 80% of the value of what we receive, of what we want, is received in the first 20% of our effort. Most of us have heard of the 80-20 rule. I looked this up a couple of years ago because I was curious where it came from. As it turns out, it comes from I'll butcher this name, Vilfredo Pareto, and he developed this, is the first one to really kind of develop this principle. And he developed it by figuring out that 80% of his P's came from 20% of his P plans. And he also figured out that 80%, at the time, 80% of the land owned in Italy was owned by 20% of the people. Hence the 80-20 rule. Rule is pretty simple in terms of business. It's really that we're going to get most of our value out of a small percentage of what we do, and that the other things that we do are going to be not as valuable to us. They're not going to generate as much value. So when we look at it in terms of applying it to features and value customers receive, the first few releases we deliver to our customers have the most valuable. We're working on the highest priority things, the most valuable things. And then as we go on and as we continue to work, if we're working with the most valuable things first, the other things, we get to a point where it's not worth it, right? It's not worth going through and continuing to work on some of these things because they don't add the value. So why would we spend the money on them? It's important to remember too that because we don't live in a static environment, things change. These things that are out on the right, under the words the rest would be considered nice to have, those things may become important. They may become very, very valuable. Top of mind for me today, top of mind for me for the last week or so has been remote work. Remote work for a lot of organizations was not allowed. It was, you can do it once in a while, but you can't do it consistently. And all of a sudden, those organizations that had that kind of approach, now suddenly remote work is very valuable, right? It's very important to them. They're in crisis mode. So that's an example of something where in the past probably wasn't so important. today, it might be very, very important. So we got to remember that things are going to change. It's a living, moving type thing. And as well, we need to, again, remember that we get 80% of our value from 20% of our effort or our features. So let's get to the ROI, because I've been talking, and I'm going to take a drink real quick. Is there, Michelle and Jane, are there any chat questions, anything coming up?
No, there's nothing else right now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's hope they're still awake. I'll keep going. So we're going to jump into, we're going to go ahead and jump into the ROI concept here and talk about it. So here's where the ROI of Agile comes in. It increases your value and reduces your risk, and we're going to talk about each of these in detail, by the way. We're going to reduce time. It can reduce your time to market, increases your user satisfaction. It can increase the quality of your products. It can increase ROI, employee satisfaction, and adapt to changing landscape. So let's go dig into those. So we talk about value and risk. Because we deliver early and we deliver often, from a value standpoint, customers get value quicker. They get, even if we deliver something that they can't use yet, being able to see it, being able to touch it, being able to explore with it, being able to validate what we've done is valuable to the organization and to the group, because they're getting feedback. The people that are doing the work are going to be able to say, yes, we're going in the right track. Hey, maybe we need to change this, we need to change that, but we're heading in the right direction. It's also valuable to the stakeholders and to the leadership team, because they're going to hear that feedback out of the users. Are things going the right direction? Are the users happy? Do they like what they're seeing? Right? Is it solving, can they see the end? Is it solving their problems? So it can increase the confidence of the organization in terms of what they're doing. Confidence that maybe they're doing the right thing and that they're all contributing. And by doing that, you can create unity within the organization. You can come together and begin to feel like we're all part of one team, because you're getting that feedback. It's not just the silos. In a traditional development approach, you don't get your value until the end. You don't get your value until it's in the customer's hands. And I mentioned a little bit earlier in this webinar about the fact that because of where we're at, if you happen to be halfway in the middle of this graph right now, and you've got a traditional project, you're taking a traditional project management approach, you may have issues. You may have things you may have things that you can't do right now. You may have business leaders may have to make hard decisions on what to do going forward and what not to. If you haven't delivered anything yet, that's all a sunk cost, and essentially it could be a waste if they decide not to go forward. Even if they delay, there's going to be waste incurred, because that software is going to be sitting there, much like a case of fruit on the dock, right? That's sitting there. It's just sitting there. Nobody's taking it, nobody's moving it, it's slowly rotting. So even software, even projects we air quote pause, it has an impact on those projects and can introduce waste or lost effort. Going on to risk, because in an Agile environment, we deliver early and we get feedback early, we're reducing the risk. We're reducing that risk because the stakeholders and the users are engaged. We know that we get their feedback. We're building to a quality standard that's defined, so we know what the quality is of the product or the product or the work that we're doing. We also understand that it, again, provides confidence to the organization because we're delivering early. In a traditional development project, a plan-driven development project, we're not going to see it until the end. We may give them a glimpse here and there, but we really don't do our testing until the end of the process. We don't know how buggy it is. We don't know what the quality is. We don't know if everything worked quite right. We don't know what challenges there are. And because we wait until to the end of that cycle, what happens is we may find out that we have a problem, and now there's a lot more things to fix because it's bigger. There's a lot more code. There's a lot more features. Maybe those people have moved on to do other things. They're off on their next project. And so it can be very challenging in a traditional development approach or a plan-driven approach to try and improve our quality or to validate that it works, which means it's more risky. The longer you go without seeing it, the more risky it is. How am I doing on time? Okay. So let's talk about time to market. So what is it that Agile, how does Agile help our time to market, right? Which is obviously going to impact our ROI. Well, because we're releasing early, we can release a minimum releasable product. We can release something that is valuable to that certain group of people. The challenge we have, remember, is that most of us want to build for everybody from innovators all the way over to the late majority. If we're building something for just the innovators and the early adopters, it gives us the opportunity that we can get it out there and get feedback. We can prove that it works. We can prove our assumptions. We're not going to be building a bunch of things that maybe people don't want, or build or add to the complexity of what we're trying to solve by putting out this big massive thing that nobody can work on, that nobody can figure out, we can't maintain. So this gives us the ability to be able to do that. A lot of organizations struggle with a minimum releasable product. And I use the term releasable, meaning you want to get it into the customer's hands. There are some systems, there are some things that you have to build it out for everybody. You have to build it out for every single capability. Maybe your minimum releasable is to your UAT environment, for example, just to get your feedback from your users. Take it all the way through and get it in a production-like environment so they can do that. But it should be able to, you should be able to do that and get that feedback early. And that helps you from a time to market. You know, one last thing about this and then I'll move on. When you think about Facebook and where Facebook is now and compare it to where it was 10 years ago, how much has it moved? If they had tried to build, Facebook had tried to build for everybody, right, all the features and capabilities that they wanted, they'd still be building and they wouldn't have any customers. So think about it from that standpoint. Who are we really trying to target here? So let's talk about user sat. So user satisfaction, I kind of covered this in the last one. The sooner the better. The sooner we get it in front of our users, the better they are, the happier they're going to be. They're engaged in the process. Because we engage with them earlier, they're less likely to go away and focus on other things. They're going to be paying more attention. They're going to give us their input better. They're going to be in a better position to help us when we do have challenges and give us feedback. Because they're engaged as well, we have an opportunity to start getting a forewarning about things that are coming, right? Are there changes that are coming down the line that we don't know about, that because they're engaged with us, we might understand better? Whether it's regulatory, legislative, market conditions, anything like that, right? Virus conditions, anything like that. We can, if we're engaging with our users sooner, we can start understanding where they're at. We're collaborating. We're more likely to be on the same page. We talk about better quality. So we get to, with an Agile approach, because we're iterative, we get to inspect the work all the way through the process. We're not waiting until the end. We're not waiting until the QA team is done and they're done with their testing phase. We get to see it up front. So because of that, we get to be able, excuse me, we get to be able to see it, and we put quality up front. We also develop, typically most organizations will have a definition of done or a checklist of things that need to happen before it goes to production. Defining what does quality mean to us? What does that, as an organization, what's our quality standard? What are we going to do? Having that quality standard and seeing it applied all the way throughout the process ensures that we don't get to the end and have to make those decisions about, hey, we got these 5 bugs out here that are really, really nasty, but we got to release. We've got to go ahead and we got to classify those as low defects so we can get this thing out. We don't have to make those decisions because quality is up front. It's measured all the way through, and we're validating. So let's move on to ROI. So return on investment, right? When we do, we're going to actually get money all the way through the process. If we waited until at the end of late majority to actually bill somebody or to actually deliver something we could charge for, we only then start capturing money. If we can deliver it early to our early adopters and our innovators, and they're willing to pay for it, that's good news. That means we can start collecting money for it, as well as we can also gather their feedback. And if you think about it, if we can start gathering money sooner, we can, in some cases, especially in a SaaS model, we can start capturing that money. Might get 6 or 7 months of extra revenue as opposed to waiting until the end.
Yeah, and Chris, can I jump in here real quick with one comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's not just, when I think about healthcare clients, right, and some of the needs that they have, it's not necessarily just about how soon can you get the product to market to start collecting those dollars. It's also about how soon can you deliver those enhancements that they're looking for so that they can provide better patient care, and it builds trust inside the two organizations, right, so that you're not losing those clients. So you're continuing to see them pay their monthly revenue. And that's where Agile holds a huge benefit to some of the clients that Jane and I work with.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I tend to focus on products because I'm typically working with software companies, and I didn't think about the healthcare side of that. It's good. And that would probably apply to a lot of other industries, just aside from healthcare as well, right? Like insurance.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
okay.
I would think so.
Okay, good. Okay, let's talk about Agile budgeting. I love this. I love talking to CPAs about this and the accounting folks. Agile really helps us from the standpoint that we budget. We're budgeting consistently. We're asking for so much money per period to do the work. We're not really focusing on the outcomes. The reason I say I love talking to the accountants about this is that they also want to know what it's going to cost, but they also know when they're going to get everything, when the end is. And I think it's really interesting as we continue to transition forward and evolve as businesses, specifically software, it never really ends. You're always going to have maintenance. You're always going to have things you have to do. You're always going to have these really good ideas that we want to explore that might help customer satisfaction, might improve productivity, might increase sales, make it operationally easier and more efficient for us to do it. It's going to continue. And so I think it's really interesting when I talk to them about that, trying to get them to understand this is actually better for you because we're working on the highest priority things. You got a fixed period of time or a fixed period of time, fixed number of resources. It should be pretty easy for you to plan your project. And so in plan-driven development, when do we get to actually see the budget? At the end, typically, right? We might be tracking it, and we might know how many resources are being applied to this and how much of that, and where the overruns are. But the one thing we generally don't know in a plan-driven development is that because most of it is done as a % complete, we really don't know if that's accurate or not. It's really is Sally is her estimate on how far she is it really a good estimate, right? Or is it just Sally telling us she's 70% done because she's actually 70% done, or because she thinks she's 70% done, or because maybe Sally's 30% done, but she doesn't want to fess up she's 70% done. She wants to avoid that hard conversation. All those scenarios have happened to me in my career multiple times. And it really makes it hard because then you start putting people on the spot. You start asking them, you've got to tell us where you're at and you got to be accurate. Well, to most people, that causes them some problems because now they have to admit that maybe they don't understand everything. Maybe they don't know what they're doing in this particular thing that they've got or this particular task. Or maybe they've had something happen that they're just embarrassed about, right? Something in their personal life that's allowed them has diverted them away from what they're supposed to be doing. So it's really interesting when we get into the plan-driven development and talk about that. In Agile, we see it every 4 weeks. Every 4 weeks, we know what the budget is, and we can validate it. We said we were going to have 7 people on the team, and they were going to be fully dedicated. Were they or not? It's very simple to go through and do that. So again, from an accounting standpoint, it makes it really easy if you take an Agile view because you can start fixing the cost, and you don't necessarily have to worry about any variable costs in it. if there's any variable cost, you're going to know it because they're going to tell you, and it's a shorter run. So employee satisfaction, again, this was one of those we get to thank Michelle for yesterday, because I don't know why I was overlooking it, but I did. So employee satisfaction, self-organizing teams. That's an interesting concept. That causes a lot of managers to shake in their boots. Self-organizing teams, meaning what? Well, that means the team is going to actually go out and figure out how to do the work. They're going to figure out how to deliver the work, what work they're going to do, and then we're going to trust them that they're going to do the work and do it in a way that makes sense and provides value. In terms of employee satisfaction, it creates an environment of trust and focus. We have to, as leaders, we have to trust our teams, and we have to trust the people on those teams, and we have to be able to provide them the opportunity to focus and be able to get things done by not letting other things get in their way. You know, the old idea that we're going to multitask and we're going to be productive, which was kind of it's kind of interesting in the 90s, and a lot of people bragged about how great they were at multitasking. They weren't very good at getting stuff done, and so that allowing the team to focus means they're going to get stuff done. It's going to be better quality. Because we're agile, we're expecting a continuous improvement cycle. We want the team to be continuously improving. If you choose to go down the Scrum path, so to speak, you know, Scrum has built in a retrospective that happens at the end of every sprint, whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And part of that process is to review what the team did well, and then also what they can improve on, and then figure out how they're going to fix that in the next sprint or the next iteration. So continuous improvement is a core thing within Agile. Sustainable pace is one that often gets overlooked. We don't have we try to avoid at all costs the 12-hour days, 6 days a week. We want, because we're fixing scope and time, or I'm sorry, because we're fixing cost and time, Scrum and Agile allow us to be able to create a sustainable pace. We want our folks to work in a way that they can work, you know, longer term. We used to say, hey, you're going to work 6 days a week and you're going to work 12 hours a day. I'm not sure I got 72 hours out of my folks when I did that. I'm not sure I got 40 hours worth of work out of my folks, because in many cases, they might fix one thing and create 4 more bugs. So, you know, for us, it's important we create a sustainable pace. We create empowerment and trust by leadership, which means as leaders, we have to empower our teams. We have to trust that they're going to do the good work, and we have to create an environment where they feel comfortable that they can go forward and do the work and figure out what they need to do. So from an employee standpoint, employees feel good when you empower them. They feel good when you entrust them. And as leaders, we have to start out by giving trust first. You can't get trust if you don't give it. So our job as leaders is to be able to give that trust out to our folks and to our teams, and they will respond appropriately. Now, that doesn't mean you just trust and you say, okay, go do it, and you never check up on them, you never ask how they're doing, you never validate. Trust but verify is the approach that we really want to take here. And then from an employee satisfaction standpoint, they get to get stuff done. They get to actually complete the work. The endorphins in the brain increase when somebody walks up to a Scrum board and moves a ticket from one place to the other. Their endorphins go up when they go into their daily stand-up or their daily Scrum meeting and they say, hey, I got this done today, and I'm taking the next thing. They get to tell everybody, I got something done. And that means a lot to people, to be able to actually feel like they're accomplishing something. And that increases employee satisfaction. So let's talk about changing landscape. Again, where we're at today. This is more relevant, I think, than it's probably ever been. We have the opportunity in an Agile world to change directions. We can change directions because we deliver complete units of work at the end of every sprint or at the end of every period. That is important because it gives us the ability to change. Now, some folks would say, well, that's a bad thing because they can change their minds. Well, yeah, you're going to get people sometimes who can't make up their mind, and you're going to feel like they're whipsawing you around. They're going, we do one sprint and we do this thing, and then the next sprint we do this thing, and then the next sprint we change priorities and go over here. You're going to have that. That's a personnel problem. That's a people problem. That's not a Scrum problem. That's not an Agile problem. So address that problem, right, when it comes up. Having the ability to change directions, even though we might not implement it, is very powerful and can help us in terms of risk, avoiding risk, and improving on our ROI. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes what I've got for today. So in review, the problems faced today by businesses are complex. We need to be innovating as quickly as we can. We need to be able to get value from our customers. They get value when they actually get the software or the product, when they can actually touch it. There's an Agile approach provides transparency and is much more so than a plan-driven approach. And then the ROI, and you can read the ROI, I just went through it. Increase value, reduce risk, time to market, user sat, quality products, ROI and budgeting, and adapting to changing landscape. And above all else, remember, if I say this, I probably say this 10 times a week, remember that Agile is not a silver bullet. It's not going to fix all your problems. You have to fix your problems. You have to be willing to address your people problems. Most of the problems we deal with today, regardless of what environment we're in, are fundamentally they're people problems. They're caused by people. They're people either don't know, or they do know and they're not doing, or they, you know, for whatever reason, maybe they made a decision that they didn't have all the information, whatever it is. All the challenges we have are people problems and things we need to address. And so Agile is not going to be that silver bullet that fixes that. You're going to have to fix that. You're going to have to bring, when these are brought to your light, brought to your attention, you'll have to take an opportunity to fix it. If you start down the Agile path, the benefits are tangible and they're real. I've seen it in organizations. I've seen organizations that have spent 3 years trying to get a product ready to demo, and we've been able to go in using an Agile mindset, have been able to go in and get it ready to demo in 4 months. And I've seen organizations go in and take a product that they couldn't get in production, and we can get it in production and working in 3 months, and do it in a way that is good for the customers, and it's good for the organization, and it can change everybody's outcomes, their opinions, their mindset. And so I really feel like that this is a good thing for all of us to consider. May not be the right time to adopt it right now, but it's something you should keep in your mind. It should be something you should consider as you go forward. And even if you can't go in and do a full Agile transformation, start small. Take some little things, do some things like do some retrospectives, right? Do some things like that to start improving and step your way forward. Do daily stand-ups. Those will help you as well. With that, I'm done. Are there any questions?
I have a question for you, Chris. So because we see this a lot with our clients, right? What happens to Agile and the benefits that it offers when the leadership team isn't behind it, right? So you have your work, you have it prioritized, and then suddenly a customer comes in screaming, and the leadership team just focuses on that one screaming customer and not the Agile in the process and following that process. Well, what happens?
That's a good question. What typically happens is the leadership team becomes I won't say obsolete, that's not the right term, but the leadership team sets the direction on where we're going, right? They're the ones that everybody follows, whether they want to admit it, or acknowledge it. That is the way it works. And so if they don't embrace an Agile mindset as well, and don't respect it, then the team won't respect it. And the team will begin to lose faith in their leadership and lose trust in their leadership, because their leadership says, oh yeah, we're with you all the way. We're going to spend all this money, we're going to do this, but we still want the ability that we can change anything at any point in time. That causes that the team hears one thing first and they think great, and then management not doing what they say they're going to do just erodes the trust. And eventually the organization will drift back to the way it was before. And I think that's what happens in a lot of organizations is we go in and we do these big projects and these big transformations, and the leadership team says, yeah, I'm good. Make sure it's everybody else. Make sure that the teams are doing it. I've got other things to do. It's too important. And eventually they go back to the way they were doing it before. And it's actually happened to me a couple times where I've gone in and been an employee in an organization. They brought me in to help them transform. I've helped them transform. For whatever reason, I've ended up going someplace else. And when I leave, the organization drifts back to the way it was before.
How do you recommend people stop that from happening? Are there any strategies that you would suggest?
I think
specifically for me and Jane, because we have to do it all the time.
I think you have to keep talking, right? I think you have to keep talking to the leadership and make sure that they're engaging. And when they're not engaging, you need to call them out and say, you need to be able to do this. You need to be able to, you need to be supportive. Here's what we follow. Here's what the outcomes are going to be. And then we go forward. One of the things I've done that I did at I can say their name. One of the things I did at Angie's List was when I was working with their leadership team, and they brought this point up about we may have things we need to do, right? Everybody's worried about I get the urgent customer request, and I've got to be able to solve that. And what we did is I asked the CTO to agree that we could do the work, right? And we could focus on the work. And that if there was anybody who needed a change, that they would have to go to the CTO to get approval. And what that did, and he agreed to that, he loved it. So what that did is they had to go to him and say, hey, I screwed up, or I didn't plan this right, or whatever, because he always wanted to know, okay, why is this an emergency now? What is it that's so valuable? And it's amazing what happened when we did that, right? When we did that and said, okay, if we're going to do this and we're going to have changes come into the Scrum team, we want to the Agile teams, it's got to go to the CTO and get approval. And that worked pretty well. The other thing you can do is, as a team, you can just plan less work. You can plan less capacity in your sprint, knowing that you're going to get some of this stuff. And you can do it as a one-off, right? Do it knowing 40% of my capacity is going to be devoted to these emergencies of the day, is what I refer them to, right? Where somebody comes in and it's costing us $100,000 a day if we don't solve this problem. If I had a nickel for every time somebody told me that, I'd be a bazillionaire by now. But the idea, right, is that you want to make sure that people understand what the problems are. And so if you can't get leadership to acknowledge it, right, the fact that this goes on, what I've done is as well is cut back on the capacity. Say that we've only got so much time per feature, right? We've only got so much time that we can devote to those features because we got all this other stuff that we got to do, whether it's maintenance, whether it's emergencies, those kind of things. You know, we all want to talk in the Agile space. We all want to talk about being empirical, but yet we also don't want any measurements going against us, right? We don't want to talk about those kind of things. I think it's important that you track your time and figure out how much time are we spending on features versus how much are we spending on maintenance, how much are we spending on technical debt, which that's probably a whole nother webinar on what technical debt is. So how much time are we spending on technical debt? And if you track that over a period of time and then add it up and show how much time capacity you're really spending on new features, it's enlightening. It can be valid justification for folks. So you have to be creative. In my experience, you have to be creative, keep talking to them, try to figure out some numbers or some things that you can point to that make sense. You have to be careful with numbers, of course, because they can, George Box's quote, all models are wrong, some are useful, is certainly applicable, right? Just because we get a number doesn't mean that's what we got to go do, but it gives us an indication. You can use some of the numbers to help point yourselves in the right direction and maybe validate some of what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Are
All
there any
right. Well, I
questions
don't
on
think we have any.
any questions on
Yeah,
the chat?
Nope, we don't have any questions, but you got a few wonderful comments about how great your presentation was, but so thorough, apparently no other questions, so.
Doubt that.
All right, so with that said, thank you, Chris, so much for joining us. I hope everyone has a great day. We're so glad you were here to hear this presentation. As always, we will send this out via email along with a short survey for you to provide feedback and suggestions for any future webinars you might like to see. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day and stay healthy.
Thank you. Bye.